things that go on. It's unattainable. It's unrealistic. Why do I say it's unrealistic? Well, bottom line, we have to get all of this stuff from China. From China. And so what is that producing? More pollution. 8% of what we clean up in the air in Michigan comes from China. In Michigan, think about California. This is a mandate that is going to hurt the process for the United States. But more importantly, it takes away what we always thought of as one of the most important principles of Americanism, and that's choice. We get a chance to choose. And in this case, a chance to choose the vehicle that works. And it might be an EV for some of us. That F-150 Lightning is a hot rod. I'd love to have it in my barn so I could take it out and impress people with the speed and the power of it. But it won't do the job that I need to do for the rest of the things I use my pickup truck for. It won't take me across my district, which is over 200 miles, without me having become a satchel of a Pony Express rider where staff will meet me at various points, let me charge, go on with my job, come back and finally pick up my car to drive home. So again, it's choice. So I'm glad that we're pushing this letter. I'm glad that there's so many of our colleagues that support it. And because of that, I think I can say I'm glad it's going to pass today on the floor of the House, the CARS Act. Thank you for doing this. Now let me add more punctuation to it by bringing on my good friend and Energy and Commerce colleague, Randy Weber from Texas.
Thank you, Lisa, for handling this. You know, folks, the radical left's all-encompassing climate alarmist onslaught has taken numerous victims over the past decades. Think of it. Plastic straws, ceiling fans, gas stoves. It's unbelievable. Now comes the EPA coming for our combustion engine cars, the descendants of the first cars over a century ago. The left will stop at nothing to tear down the legacy of great American innovators. EPA's EV proposal serves as a de facto ban that will eliminate choice, distort the market, and restrict consumer choice, all the while costing taxpayers more. That's why I say that the EPA stands for eventually paralyzing America. To put this in perspective, how out of touch the proposal is, there are 260 million gasoline and diesel-powered passenger vehicles on the road today. 260 million. There's only a paltry 3 million EVs. Clearly, the American people are not sold on this rush to insanity that they're calling EVs. You know, I saw a survey the other day that stated 90% of all electric vehicles are still on the highway. The other 10% made it home safely. All jokes aside, the government should always let the market and consumer choice drive EV adoption instead of forcing EVs on unwilling Americans. The Biden's EPA's radical plan is an assault on America's sensibilities, and it will ultimately cost Americans even more while, as has been pointed out, increasing our dependency on China and its near monopoly on critical minerals. Ultimately, the desire to transition from dependable combustion engine cars to kitschy electric vehicles is just another page in the left's playbook called How to Destroy America. They hate the classic American lifestyle, preferring instead to hamstring our country in various ways for their vicious cycle of what I call virtue signaling. In America, we let consumers choose the car they drive. It is that simple. Let Americans drive the agenda, not some high-minded bureaucrat. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my good friend, John Rutherford.
Thank you, Randy, and thank all of you for being here this morning. You know, I've been a conservative my whole life, conservationist my whole life, and I really believe in the free markets. And I have to tell you, the electric vehicle production should be driven, as Randy just said, by consumer demand, not the illogical and dangerous extreme climate agenda coming out of the Biden administration. The EPA now wants to require that over 2/3 of all vehicles produced in the U.S. be fully electric. When let me give you this example. Think back when the first Model T rolled off the assembly line. America didn't go around and shoot all the horses, right? But that's what this administration is doing. They're going around and shooting all the fossil fuel horses. That's not the way this transition should be taking place. And in fact, what they've done is they destroyed the very economy that would have provided and could have provided the capital that you need for conservation, innovation, and adaptability. They have destroyed it. Just because we can make EVs, it doesn't mean they are the right fit for every American. American citizens, not the government, should decide which vehicle is right for them. And 90% has been mentioned by everyone up here, I believe. These EV battery supply chains currently reside in China. The Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, and none of these batteries perform that well, which is why Americans refuse to buy them. So the EPA has now become Big Brother and is going to force Americans to buy EVs, making the U.S. economy even more dependent on the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. As a member of the House Appropriations Committee, I worked with my colleagues to block this EPA rule in the 2024 Interior Appropriations Bill, and I'm proud to join my colleagues here today to encourage congressional leaders to keep this important oversight provision in a final funding bill. We must understand and stand united against the Biden administration's Green New Deal agenda that will kill jobs, destroy our economy, and erode our national security. CCP and EVs are not for me. They shouldn't be for you either. And with that, I'll turn it over to my good friend Chip Roy.
Thanks, John. Well, I'll be brief. My voice is a little worse for the wear, but I just wanted to thank Lisa, thank Tim for his leadership in the legislation this week. Wholeheartedly agree with all my colleagues, what John just said. Everybody's said most of the stuff, right? In this town, everything's been said, but not everybody said it. So I'm not going to repeat it. All of those talking points are really important, right? In terms of what we're dealing here with the Chinese Communist Party, the materials, the child labor that has been exploited around the world, literally slave labor to go mine cobalt. Where are all the bleeding hearts talking about that issue when they go down to the floor and they virtue signal about batteries? Look, the truth here is pretty simple. All of those issues notwithstanding, boils down to a simple truth. The average American family is hurting. The average American family, the hardworking American family trying to make ends meet, can't afford the basic necessities of life: food, shelter, health care, an automobile to get from point A to point B. We are, by a mandate, and it is a mandate, as was pointed out, we are going to make it almost impossible for a family, a plumber, an electrician, a teacher, somebody out there just trying to make ends meet, start a business for their family, to be able to have a vehicle to do their job. These vehicles are $16,000 more expensive on average. You have to stop and charge them. Gavin Newsom 2 years ago literally told the people of California, sorry, between 4 p.m. and 9 p.m., we're asking you to go not charge your cars. What do you do if you're stuck? What do you do if your wife is pregnant and going to the hospital? What do you do? And these questions are existential threats to the well-being of American families. Where is Fox? Where's CNN? Where are all the news? Why isn't this room filled? Is there a more existential threat than the ability of the American family to have a vehicle to take care of themselves? The mandate coming from the executive branch, that's what it is being directed at the American family. We're trying to stop it in Congress, but we know what will happen. We'll pass a bill today. I believe we'll do that. And Chuck Schumer will kill it in the Senate. And so this is why I have raised the issue about why we keep funding the very bureaucrats that are going to implement this rule. I realize that gets controversial, but that's the question, right? We give money to the federal government and the EPA
to implement this rule. We give money to the federal government to carry out the Inflation Reduction Act, which is at war with the American people. And that ought to be driving all of our decisions in the coming months. I applaud the Speaker for checking the administration and checking the Senate. I applaud my colleagues for moving this legislation and raising this issue. I applaud my colleagues on this side of the aisle for standing up for the American family. I hope the press will report this, because there's nothing more existential to the threat of the American dream than the ability of a family to take care of itself, and that's what's at stake here. With that, I'll turn it over to my friend from California, Doug LaMalfa.
Thank you, Chip. Thank you, Ms. McClain, for leading us on this here today and for the legislation. Well, let me tell you a tale about California here, since my colleagues are enjoying doing that. And I'm a little history. Going back to 1990, the California Air Resources Board mandated that by year 2000, 10% of all vehicles would have to be zero-emission vehicles, which basically meant battery-powered vehicles. Well, the example I saw most often of trying to meet that mandate with a vehicle that didn't yet exist was, I'm a Ford guy, Ford buyer, so my Ford dealer had this little vehicle called a Think with an exclamation mark behind it. So check that out, Google that when you get a chance. This was supposed to be the answer for people to drive. Basically, it was a glorified golf cart that you might see like Tattoo from Fantasy Island driving around in, and this was going to be a viable vehicle for people to use. Well, they had to relent on that because the battery technology, the car technology wasn't there by the year 2000 for them to force people to have this as an alternative for 10% of cars in California. So California keeps mandating and mandating. Chip mentioned about, Newsom. They're saying, well, we need to force electric cars. You got to just CARB to do that, with arbitrary. They pick these round numbers out of the year. By 2035, you want 30% or 50%, whatever the number is they make up that day. So, indeed, as soon as they announced that, Governor Newsom's team, a few days later, they said, well, just don't charge it during this time because our grid is going to melt down. And then on top of that, just a few months later, we had some huge power outages due to freezing, with a lot of rain and snow and such that turned into ice. When at the same time they're saying we don't have any water in California, so we have to ration it down to 42 gallons per day per person. We got a real good deal going in California. And so folks were stuck in their homes without electricity. And as my colleagues have mentioned, the same time we're mandating more and more things have to be use electricity, stoves, and mandating that we take away ceiling fans and all these other ridiculous things they come up with. At the same time, they're taking down dams in the north end of my district on the Klamath River. They're trying to do it on other projects up in Washington, Oregon, etc., and taking away the ability to make electricity. They got rid of the San Onofre nuclear power plant down in San Diego years ago because it needed to have some repairs done to it that they couldn't possibly get the permits timely, so they just gave up. And then the nuclear power plant in San Luis Obispo, they gave it a 5-year reprieve. It was going to be shut down starting this year and next year with its 2 reactors, or no, next year and following. And so those two represented 18% of the power grid in California, those 2 nuke plants. Thankfully, we saved 9% in one of them for a while. They do not believe in generating the power that they're forcing us to use. So take a truck, for example. In order to make a truck with enough battery capacity and distance capability, you would have to add 16,000 pounds to a weight of a truck to have enough battery. All right? So a truck weighs 80,000 pounds GVW, and its payload is about 55,000 pounds. Basically, you would be getting rid of about a third of the payload of the trucks, requiring 1/3 more trucks to be on the highway if they all become electric. No one thinks about this stuff. I see these dainty little ads on Facebook and stuff from one of the major cargo carriers saying, it'll be nice. They got a little kid drawing on there of an airplane. We need to have electric airplanes someday. Like, we can't even get the airplane off the ground with people or cargo in it with the weight the airplane will have to be. It's ridiculous what these people are doing. And so mandating my vehicle, others, the cost of it, if you want to have, there's a certain amount of people want to buy them, but you need to eliminate the subsidy. You need to eliminate the free charging stations if you work for the state in Sacramento. And you need to put it where it's not giving fake advantages to buy these vehicles. And then you'll find out it's not just the elites or the high-end income people and certain people that can drive in the fast lane in California because of a special sticker for EVs. You're going to get down to what the real market is. And there's not that many people want these. You go to the Ford dealer, you go to any dealer, they're still sitting there. And when you have Ford, for example, that showed a loss of $4.5 billion, that combined with their new UAW contract, what is the price of a vehicle for everyone else going to be? It's going to to be horrendously higher. It's already hard to afford a new vehicle these days if you can even get one. So this is a horrific mandate on top of many other horrific mandates that this administration is putting out that's going to mess up the electrical grid, put more weight on the electrical grid, and take away choices from American consumers, which is the bottom line. I want my choices. I'm not going to tell everybody else what they can drive. You want to buy an electric car, buy it in the free market and enjoy, the limited mileage that people fret about. So I'm glad we can move in this direction. I appreciate the time. I yield back. And my next colleague is going to be Keith Self. Thank you.
Let me be clear. Biden's radical electric vehicle mandate is a ludicrous fantasy of an administration hell-bent on transforming our nation into a socialist state. Guys, this is a wake-up call. Pay attention to what's happening. This is beyond gas. This is beyond oil. This is beyond coal. They're now coming for not only our cars, our stoves, our air conditioners, and now even our light bulbs. If we do not stop this EV mandate rule, we are bending our knee to China for the sake of the leftist, globalist, Green New Deal agenda. The Biden administration is weaponizing climate change hysteria against the American people, and this administration will be mugged by reality when we cannot supply the electricity that this mandate requires. I stand with my colleagues to oppose this radical mandate. I will be followed by my good friend, John James.
Thank you, Keith. Go Army, beat Navy. I'm a former automotive supplier, and I understand the automotive supply chain intimately. I recognize the Biden administration's forced transition to EVs, the comply or die mandates being pushed down from the federal government to everyone, from dealers to mechanics to suppliers of all shapes and sizes, will absolutely crater our economy. It will devastate the local and state economy in Michigan. And representing Michigan's 10th congressional district, the #1 manufacturing district in the nation, I am duty bound to speak out. If you want an EV, get an EV. But the federal government should never force you to make a choice with what you do with your money. I was proud to vote for and be an original co-sponsor of Tim Walberg's CARS Act because Americans deserve choice in the vehicle they drive, not a governmental mandate. I've long been beating the drum on the risks of imposing this comply or die EV mandate on car manufacturers, dealers, and consumers. This bill is an important step toward giving Americans choice in the vehicle they drive, not just mandating it. Just last week, we saw 3,000 auto dealers sign a letter opposing Joe Biden's electric vehicle mandate. 211 of them are in Michigan, some including my district, the #1 manufacturing district in America. Did I mention that? See, look, the jobs that we see going to China and Mexico aren't because the companies are sending them there on their own volition. It's because the tax and regulatory and tort environment are making it adversarial to do business in America and Michigan. We are exporting our middle class to other countries because of the government overregulation, overtaxation, and meddling in your lives. It will crater our national economy and will put Michigan even further behind than we are economically in the future. Their argument, though, is there simply isn't a strong enough demand for EVs to keep up the level of production the car companies must produce to comply with the Biden administration's mandates. You know what they do? They put policies out there to jack up the price of your gas. And even last year, you had Democrat politicians saying, well, you know what, gas too high, just get a $60,000 EV. Well, most people who are struggling to put food on the table and struggling to afford $6 gas a couple of years ago, it's arrogant for them to say, just buy a $60,000 EV. We have to do what is best for the American people, not for someone's federal government mandates. This is what happens when the government forces American automotive industry to conform to strict standards. Their costs will be passed on to the people. And it's not just the companies that are suffering from this rushed transition into electrification. I believe in an all-the-above energy approach. We need to be taking a look at how the market is going to address this and make sure that everybody has the cheapest, cleanest, and most sustainable solution moving forward. It's not just these companies suffering. It's the automotive workers. The auto workers are suffering. The auto workers are looking at their pensions going away. They're looking at their wages going down. They're looking at their opportunity going to other states and other countries. It's the jobs that are moving to other states and other countries to avoid passing this 40% increase on this EV manufacturing cost on the customers. The mandates that are being forced down Americans' throats will be felt for generations. And so we stand in solidarity with the American people. We stand in solidarity with their choices. And we stand in solidarity with the companies and the people who make them run each and every single day to protect and preserve their choice and freedom. It is now my honor to pass it on to Mr. Andrew Clyde.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you to Congresswoman McClain for your leadership on this important matter, for your letter. Joe Biden's radical electric vehicle mandate dangerously expands government control over Americans' daily lives, unnecessarily imposes a hefty financial burden on workers and families already struggling from Bidenomics, and recklessly enriches our number one economic foe, Communist China. This illegitimate power grab is bad for the U.S. energy sector, it's bad for automakers, most importantly, it's bad for the American people. Congress has an obligation to stop the Biden administration's harmful government overreach in its tracks, and thankfully House Republicans are fighting to defund and take down the EPA's woke electric vehicle mandate. I'm incredibly pleased that my amendment to prohibit the funds for the implementation of the Biden administration's disastrous EV mandate was included in the Republican en bloc to the fiscal year 24 Interior and Environmental Appropriations Bill during committee markup. That's actually page 193, lines 6 through 12 in the appropriation. And I'm glad that the Interior Appropriations Bill, which included this vital amendment, passed the whole House of Representatives earlier this year. In addition, later today, the House will vote on H.R. 4468, the Choice in Automobile Retail Sales, or the CARS Act, a bill that I proudly co-led with Representative Wahlberg. This important legislation would prohibit the EPA from finalizing, implementing, administering, or enforcing its radical proposed rule, its Green New Deal agenda. Together, through both the appropriations process and the CARS Act, House Republicans are fighting to save the American energy sector, to protect both American consumers, auto manufacturers, and prevent the Biden administration's authoritarian government overreach from taking effect. If you think about it, you have one agency, the EPA, and a bureaucrat, an unelected bureaucrat, that creates a rule that requires the entire Congress, the House, the Senate, and the President to sign it, to take it down. That's too much power for an unelected bureaucrat. So passage of our bill marks a critical battle against Joe Biden's war on American energy, one that we must win, not just for us, but for all of America, for all of the American people. Thank you, and now I'd like to turn it over to my good friend, Congressman Strong.
Thank you, Congressman, and especially thank you, Congresswoman McClain, for leading this. Your leadership on this important issue, the rule proposed by the EPA to require 2/3 of the vehicles sold in the U.S. to be fully electric by 2032, is harmful to the free market and to everyday Americans. It kills manufacturing. I've had several auto manufacturers and suppliers in my district of Alabama, one of which produces 3,200 gas-powered engines every 24 hours. That would be severely impacted if we allow this proposed EPA rule to be put into place. It's not good for America. This is nothing more than an attempt by the Washington bureaucracy to overstep its bounds and force companies to fit their green agenda. It hurts everyday consumers. An electric vehicle is almost $20,000 more expensive than a gas-powered car. At a time when the Biden administration's inflation is costing the average American family over $11,000 more per year, unelected bureaucrats want to force hardworking Americans to spend even more.
Lastly, I appreciate Chairwoman Granger and the subcommittee Chairman Simpson, as well as my Republican colleagues, for ensuring that the House passed appropriation package does not contain funding to allow this rule to take effect. I'll have my Mr. Burchett, Congressman Burchett, will be next. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all for being here. Thank you, ma'am, for your leadership on this issue. The Biden administration recently demonstrated once again it prioritizes radical climate agenda over the interest of hardworking Americans. The EPA proposed a rule, as you've heard, that will effectively require only over 2/3 of the vehicles sold in the United States to be fully electric in less than 9 years. The White House acts like it puts the interest of the American people first, but who do they really putting first? The interest of China. They're in bed with China, and we know it. These Green New Deal policies do not help. They don't help the folks in my district who can't spend $60,000 dadgum dollars on an electric car that maybe doesn't work and probably can't get it worked on. They don't help Americans in the auto industry whose jobs are at risk if we keep pushing electric vehicle policies. They do help, though, the climate lobbyists and, of course, the Chinese communists. China processes 75% of the critical minerals used in electric vehicle batteries. Minerals like lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, and manganese. Some of these are often referred to as rare earth minerals. It's not in my notes, but the reality is we can get a lot of those minerals here. And the reason they're so dadgum rare is because the government put so many restrictions on mining in this country. And once again, we propel the agenda of foreign countries like China. China, of course, controls 76% of the global battery cell production capacity. The U.S. only controls about 7%. I fully support American manufacturers selling more electric vehicles if that's what they want to do. I do not support the government forcing this agenda down American companies' throats, and I believe the volume of electric vehicles on the streets today is around about 3%, and so we're going to upturn the whole thing for 3%. The American government's this administration's solution, if they want to sell more toilet paper, is to put laxatives in the water. Well, that's not the way America thinks. We need to let the market decide. So, thank you, and I will turn it over to Lisa. We're done. Thank you.
We saved the best for last.
As well, you should. And why did he push this button? What did that do? Oh.
Don't touch it. Didn't your mom ever tell you, don't touch anything?
No, and Dad said, take it apart, figure out how to make it work.
In closing, I just want to thank everyone, all of my colleagues for being here today. I want to thank over the 150 of my colleagues in the House and more than 30 senators who actually signed on to this bill, who actually care about America, America's energy, and believe in the people to make choice. So with that, thank you very much. And have a great. Oh, we have a question. Yeah. Sure.
Just wondering if and when this EPA rule does get finalized, is there plans to file a CRA or anything about that?
Absolutely. Listen, the House Republicans will not stop. This is something that we feel very passionately about for our people, for choice, for our auto workers. I mean, just think of it. If you build and you mandate electric vehicles, that takes less workers, less parts. Tell me what that's going to do to our already struggling economy. So yes, we will take all the necessary and appropriate measures to make sure that we reverse this horrific policy.
When the appropriation is signed into law, that will also terminate the rule through defunding it.
Yes, ma'am.
So, you've been talking about lifting this in the appropriations bill. Is that a hard line for you guys? Something you'd be willing to say shut down the government over?
Listen, I'll speak for myself. It's a hard line for me. And I'll share with you why it's a hard line for me, because I believe in America. And I am tired of the government telling me what I can do, what I can drive, what I can cook my food with. I mean, what's going to be next? Are they going to tell me what I can eat and how many calories I can have a day? At some point in time, you have to have some faith in what this country was built upon, which was free market, capitalism. It's not perfect, but it is the best of all systems. So I can share with you, for me, it is 100% a hard line because I want to take care of Americans and the American worker. Yes, sir.
During the Trump administration, this is a broader question. There were legal back and forth between the state of California and the government of the EPA on rules mandating vehicles. And I'm just wondering if you think this should in some ways be a state issue versus a federal issue when it comes to regulating, what the vehicle standards are or manufacturing and those types of things.
I think there's a difference between a regulation and a mandate. So I do believe in states' rights. I do believe in those states' issues. But when the federal government is mandating what I can do with my money, come on, that's a bridge too far for me. So I do believe in states' issues, but we're not talking about regulate. We're talking about a mandate. We're talking about the federal government using the EPA as weaponization, as we've seen, in so many instances, telling a manufacturing company what they have to sell, and the consumer doesn't want to buy it. That is ridiculous. So I think just a little bit of a difference there. With that, thank you again for your time, and thank you again for my colleagues. Have a great day.
Thank you.
What does this button do? Anybody?